So today I really want to take just 20 minutes to talk to you about the kind of things we looked at, why we're looking at them, why we think they're really important for the profession, and how we work together with CFA Institute to create a kind of range of looking at how companies deal with social and environmental issues, and then how analysts, financial analysts, will then use the information that companies create to then create this sort of chain of high quality information that changes behaviours, that changes companies, and creates the kind of economies and societies that we want to. So probably before I get started, it's worth just recapping a little bit on some of the things we've been doing. So we launched a report during the UN General Assembly this week, during the UN Climate Summit earlier in, middle of September. And we held an event with IFAC, and it was called Creating Value in a Climate Emergency. And it was great to be working with IFAC, have a packed room, talking about what's the role of the profession, of professional accountants, in dealing with the climate emergency. And we had some great speakers from Deloitte, from Financial Times, from the World Business Council of Sustainable Development, from Salesforce, looking really sort of deeply at what are the issues facing the profession in dealing with climate change and dealing with climate risk, so risk to business from climate change. You can find a video and a recording of this online, and we'll share the links with you. So onto the report, what did we do? Well, we outside of working with CFA, we also worked with an ESG analytics software as a service platform called Datamaran. And we used their big data analytics tool to look at corporate disclosures around the world, different regions, different sectors, looking at a range of social and environmental issues. And we're going to share the PowerPoint with you with some slides looking at the data. I'm really interested in your feedback on these charts. I think the thing to bear in mind when looking at the data, and really interested for any questions you have, is to think about why are disclosures so low on really key social and environmental issues, and what's the role of the profession in helping to elevate the quality of those disclosures. And those are some of the things we look at in the report. I guess as a kind of taking it from the top, why do we think this is so important? Well, we think our economies aren't working anymore. The way we run our economies are causing a kind of serious problem with inequality, this sort of pernicious problem with inequality that's just a feature, in a way, of the kind of economies that we've created. The top 10, the share of income growth going to the top 10% of people is just growing. This is having a knock-on effect in terms of social mobility, in terms of the way policies are created, in terms of the way we sort of, our broader economies come together. We also thought that it's worth bearing in mind that our economies are transforming. If we look at something like how societies are aging, the old age economic dependency ratio, the rate at which, the number of people retired versus the number of people who are in work is really just going off the scale. So we've got a smaller group of people supporting through their work a larger group of people outside of work, over 65, for example, around the world. And this is going to radically change the way our societies look, the types of products and services that we need to provide these people. And loads of other issues in there on the social side that we think are important. The rise of non-communicable diseases like cancers, like diabetes, like other issues, putting huge strains on healthcare. Health is a huge area that is causing a number of kind of really difficult problems to solve. And when you take all of those social issues and you add in the environmental problems that we kind of know all about, we're starting to face a really big, complex set of interconnected challenges. So when I'm thinking about the environmental issues, very concretely, we're talking about climate change. So we're talking about what the world's going to look like with 3 degrees of warming. 3 degrees, which current policies around the world sort of look like we're heading towards. What is that going to mean for not just things like extreme weather, the rise of extreme weather, rise in global temperatures, sea level rise, and those kind of physical manifestations of climate change, but also what that's going to mean for the kind of just a general daily operating world of the businesses that we work in, the organizations that we work for. How is things going to change, and how are regulations going to change in so many ways to kind of meet that challenge, the resilience issues, just the daily way that we're doing business. So we're not just talking about food supplies, for example, and crop failures and those kind of things. We're talking about transition changes through regulation, which we're going to have to adapt to. And that's if we hit 3 degrees of warming, which it looks like. This is actually very, very extreme, and we need to bear in mind, what are the implications of that? Are we ready for that as businesses? Are we ready for that as finance professionals? Do we know what the risk is going to be to how we operate? Take them together, the social and the environmental. We've got a huge set of complex challenges that we need all actors, business, governments, and civil society to come together and to address at a national level, at a local, subnational level, but also at a global level. Global level agreements being something that are really, really challenging these days. National level political will, in some areas, there's a lot of consensus around issues. In some, there's also a lot of tension. So, these things are not going to get solved easily. What does it mean for business? Well, I think I've mentioned, the disruption, and the disruption is a big factor. But what's the role in business in solving these problems? Well, actually, a very simple way of thinking about what's the near-term way of addressing these kind of issues is looking at understanding risks a lot better, understanding social and environmental risks to a much greater degree. So what are the risks to your operations from these issues? Climate change is a great one. Your dependencies on the natural environment being another one. If we think about the services that nature provides to us in terms of raw material inputs, in terms of the kind of ecosystem services that they provide in terms of regulating the temperature, the hydrological cycle, soil health. We're all dependent on nature through our businesses to various degrees. If these things change, well, our exposure is enormous, and we need to be able to be ready to deal with those. And that's just taking those risks much more seriously. Taking that step on, we need to think about how can we create value and create opportunities and create positive social and environmental impact, regenerative businesses, stepping things on a gear. So really thinking about how we can change the way we operate so that we create the markets and the businesses and the societies of the future that we want to live in. We need to accept there is going to be some transformation that's happening as a result of issues essentially caused by business impact on nature, on climate change. But we also have a role in creating the transformation, in creating the kind of multi-capital value, to borrow a term from integrated reporting, multidimensional social impact through business activity. And that is what the report addresses. I'm not going to go into the data in much detail, but I'd urge you to look at the kind of amazing stuff we looked at in the report on company disclosures. So when we looked across a range of issues like climate change and air quality, human rights, natural capital, looking at the product responsibility and some others, when we looked at the level of disclosures by companies of these issues, and we did this using natural language processing and emphasis scoring across thousands of companies, thousands of data points, using this incredibly sophisticated software developed by this ESG analytics provider, Datamaran, we saw that year on year, corporate disclosures are just low, incredibly low. We scored the emphasis from 0 to 3. So we looked at across a range of reporting elements. We looked at regulatory filings. We looked at financial reports, so audited reports. We also looked at other voluntary initiatives, sustainability reporting, and we looked at those together, but we also weighted them. So if we saw something in a regulatory filing, if we saw it in a financial report, it was given a greater emphasis than if it was something that was outside of that. If a term appeared in a CEO letter, for example, that again was given a greater emphasis. So we kind of, we found a way using their tool to assess the quality, the level to which companies were taking these issues seriously. So you can look at the charts in the report, and I hope you find them interesting. We also looked at we also sort of evaluated this in another way, and we looked across regions and sectors at these issues, and we looked at what the level of corporate reporting was on a particular issue versus the strength of regulations, voluntary initiatives, and news and social media interest in an issue. And what we wanted to find was that there's some kind of convergence between the quality of reporting and the emphasis placed on an issue through regulations and news, for example. And what we found was actually really disturbing. We found in most cases the strength of interest in an issue from regulators, that's met by voluntary initiatives, that is prevalent in social media, was just not really being met by corporate disclosures. And that's today, right? That's today when a number of these issues, sure, climate change, very salient, there's a lot of interest in it. Waste management, something that's kind of highly regulated. Some of these issues we hope are kind of better understood. Those were already low. Newer issues around human rights, around natural capital, were just really poorly dealt with, poorly addressed by companies. As I said, you can look this up in the research, and we'll share some slides for you to look at. And please come back with any questions that you have. With all of that information, the final couple of things we did was look at, okay, given that we know these disclosures are pretty poor at the moment, given that we know the scale of the challenge in terms of these big picture issues, and we sort of think we know how businesses should be responding to these issues, we made some suggestions for approaches for companies to take, different approaches that businesses can look at for dealing with social and environmental issues. And I'm just going to run through them quickly before a couple of final points, and hopefully some of them will resonate with you. As I said, look at the report, read the references in the report itself to sort of dig into these in more detail. The first was around climate risk and the task force for climate-related financial disclosures. Entity-specific risk around climate is a big topic for regulators, for central banks, and others. And we know there's a huge role for the profession in linking exposure to climate change to balance sheet and revenue impact. Already, so many companies have signed up to report on this. It's becoming mandatory or de facto mandatory in so many places. Climate risk is really something where the profession is well prepared to help their organisations engage with these issues and provide that kind of information to the marketplace to help inform decision making. Think about decision making. Another thing we looked at was better understanding of natural capital. Businesses' dependencies on nature are obvious, but we need to be much better at quantifying and explaining the business dependencies on nature. So using tools like the Natural Capital Protocol to provide that kind of information to a business is really vital. Better disclosure through reporting on natural capital risks, again, is also really important, and we are very supportive of frameworks that are out there, like the Climate Disclosure Standards Board framework for natural capital disclosures. Those two, decision making to help internal processes plus disclosure, can come together to really help organizations engage with their natural capital dependencies and risks. in a really meaningful, concrete way that can change the way businesses operate. This is what we're trying to do. A third one is around circular models. Circular business model innovation is something that we know, again, the profession can help prepare. What do we mean by circular? Well, closed loops, regenerative businesses, ones that make no waste, right? It's a clear role for the profession in helping to change how businesses are financed. Maybe more stuff, if it's being leased, for example, needs to be pre-financed. So it sort of changes the equation for how a business operates. Similarly, leasing contracts, for example, are a really important part of circular business models, where something is being offered as a service, as opposed to being sold as a physical product. Again, really strong area for the profession. Moving on to a couple more. Social impact and the SDGs. Alignment to the Sustainable Development Goals. Thinking much better about positive social impact, how you create it, how you disclose that information, is something that requires processes to be put in place, right? So that resource can be allocated to these areas. We know that disclosure of risks is not enough. We need companies to be really thinking about their positive social impact and preparing this information in a meaningful, balanced and fair way that avoids the kind of purpose washing that we see out in the marketplace in a lot of areas, and I'm sure many of you know about this, have come across this. And the final one, thinking about purpose, is to really be, we want our members to help support businesses create very purpose-led strategies. We know companies that have a very strong purpose that is concretely tied to different types of I guess, robust measurement approaches and sort of policies and strategies can create more resilient, better businesses. And ingraining purpose, having a social mission at the highest level, thinking about how it goes down through the company but also feeds back in a bottom-up way, is something that we know is really important to support. So those are a few of the approaches that we look at in the report. Again, you can sort of dig into those in more detail. Just to finish up, I've got 4 points that I want to leave you with for you guys to take away. So what do we think is really important for ACCA to support its members to do? And the first one is we're calling for greater scientific literacy. Scientific literacy to be taken as important as data literacy, right? And in fact, the two worlds come together. We want fluency around environmental issues, around issues to do with carbon, energy, natural capital. Kind of fluency around this is so important today, so that business decisions can be made that are meaningful and real. A second one that we look at is for the profession to take its skills to better understand context, the external environment, and provide, when creating, when helping with decision-making disclosure activities, to help understand the context, right? And to provide that context to the business. We're operating, thinking about these systems outside of us. The SDGs provide a great pathway for thinking about those in a bit more detail. Context matters, precision matters around the data. If we want to take this stuff seriously, profession is well placed to provide those skills, and those skills to a finance team, to a business that's looking to transform, and for you to help support a business to transform. There are a couple of final points to take away. I guess a couple of other ones would be to just think about working in networks. So multi-stakeholder, collaborative approaches are becoming much more important. We all know this. I'm sure you work in networks much more than you used to, but we want finance teams and professional accountants to be part of those coalitions, to be part of helping those coalitions really create concrete outcomes. And the final one, which I just want to leave you with, and thank you for your time today, I hope the rest of the discussion goes really, really well, is that often stuff around environment, or whatever it might be, can seem quite technocratic. We need to link the environmental with the social. there will be no transition to a low carbon, environmentally aware economy without one that is also socially just. The issues around inequality, those kind of things are so important for us to make that transition right. We know that people on lower incomes are more affected by environmental issues, for example, than those on higher incomes who are able to insulate themselves from those problems. We know that people living in parts of the world, in poorer countries of the world, are much more exposed to climate risks than other parts of the world, having to spend much more of their household budgets on dealing with climate risks and adaptation and resilience already. If we don't bake in the idea of a just transition into this transition, there won't be the transformation taking place. Thank you for your time today. I hope that was just a whistle-stop tour of the report that we have recently created. I hope you find it interesting, and please feel free to get in touch with me and our team in Professional Insights. Thanks very much.